In this week's Shoeshine, Dita De Boni looks at the various ways climate activists around the world are fighting companies, governments and bodies like the EU in the courts to try and force action on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Dita, we're obviously talking about the Mike Smith v Fonterra and others court case, which was earlier this month.
Yes.
I'm loath to say, let's just recap that, but what was the broad finding there?
Can't be done too quickly.
Yeah.
But basically, this is a case taken in a civil court, which is a first for New Zealand, which looks at various claims against these emitters, sort of using a novel approach in how it's trying to force them to account for their emissions. So it's using claims of nuisance, it's using claims of a breach of care of duty, which is kind of a new thing for a company to have to consider because they don't usually, a government has a care of duty rather than a company, and a novel claim that they should not be taking part in climate change emissions, that they should be reducing their impact because it's quite hard to prove that, an individual person has been impacted by climate change because of, say, Fonterra or so forth. So these are new kind of things. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. It'll go back to the High Court.
So the Supreme Court case about whether he could even bring this claim was heard, mid-2022 from memory? And
yes.
Litigation partners in New Zealand that we spoke to at the turn of the year were all, all eyes were on this case. So what are they saying in the wake of the decision?
Well, they're all saying it's going to be game-changing, obviously. But for business, the better businesses are already factoring in risks like this. So I think that what it just does is highlight once more that these risks are coming from all different angles. Climate activists around the world are trying all different ways to bring businesses and governments to justice, and they're using all sorts of arguments, things like human rights, all sorts of things.
So should business be on alert now, or how do they digest what this decision means for them?
Business should be on alert. They should be and to be honest, the good ones are already doing this. The people like the Institute of Directors, they have long hammered this idea that these liability risks are going to be a big thing. But it's things like, insurance. They might have to reconsider how their insurance is configured. And just looking at it seems to me that their, scope 2 and 3 emissions also have to be very strongly and carefully factored into to what they do.
This has sort of been described as quite a unique judgment in the international climate. I mean, what is happening overseas in this space, though? There is this sort of action all around the world? There's
action all around the world. From about 2015 to about 2020-21, these cases doubled or tripled, around the world. So most of them still take place in America, but there's an increasing number in the developing world, and those kind of tend to fall on human rights concerns, but also Indigenous things. Young people are bringing cases. I even saw one where older women had brought a case in Sweden saying that they were very susceptible to heat, which, as you will know, is our long writing on menopause. That is so. There are all these novel kind of claims. It's quite interesting.
So obviously ramifications to come, but I guess at the top, director liability looks like that's just got even more complicated.
Director liability. This won't be the last case. Even if he gets it through, it definitely won't be the last case because there'll be many others that are aping it. But even if he doesn't, I think it will give people ideas. Something that I've read is that, or I've heard from one of the sources, was that a novel case, because one of the torts he's bringing is novel, new, that will encourage other activists to come up with their own new ideas on how to get around things. So I think either way, we're going to see a lot more of this.
Plenty of work for lawyers as well.
As always.
Dita, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
To support our award-winning independent journalism, subscribe to nbr.co.nz.